in LA.
I think you should kick it off because I just love what you just told me. Pre-sesh, go girl.
Yeah, I love finding new teachers, right? Because I'm constantly like you, constantly learning, constantly seeking out people that inspire me, that can help me raise my game and my skillfulness around my game, whatever my game is. And so I found someone new who I was listening to yesterday, this guy, Dennis Waitley, who is literally like, I think he's 83 and so wise and so sharp and so vivacious. And he wrote The Psychology of Winning, like way back when. And he's trained NASA astronauts and Olympic athletes, and just like, he's our guy. Like he's our guy. He's our people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I was listening to him yesterday, and he really inspired me for today's session, which is going to be all about the number one biggest, most powerful predictor of success. And this is research-based. Like there's been a lot of research, like evidence-based research around success. And this one thing is the number one predictor of success.
I love it. I believe
and that's positive self-talk.
Yeah. It's
so simple, and it's hard, and it's sneaky, because the opposite, the negative self-talk, is sneaky.
It hides.
It's sneaky, and it's hard.
Totally.
And so it's just that we're wired, and it's happening without us even being aware of it. And so I wanted to talk today about why this is so important and so powerful, how we can get better at it, all the different ways to practice this and have a zero tolerance policy. It is unacceptable to have any negativity in our self-talk. We need to be our biggest coach. I was inspired.
Yeah. Well, I think what's awesome about this topic too is talking about all of the counter argument about positive self-talk and affirmations and all this stuff. Like there's so much like, oh, just be positive. You know what I mean? Which understandably people would be like, you can't just be positive and
you got to do the work.
Negative and avoid and put your head in the sand and deny and all that stuff. So I think when people hear positive self-talk, they're like, oh, here we go. Just positivity, which is not what we're talking about. It's a skill set to build. The dishwasher. It's a skill set.
I couldn't hear it.
It's a skill set to build, not a tactic for avoidance. It's a skill set to work through and undo that negative self-talk that's in there unconsciously and all that stuff. It's to help us get through that and to grow forward from that.
Yeah. And it's like, I was just inspired with this kind of visualization of like, all right, suppose we wanted to like shoot an arrow and hit a target, and like we aim it and it starts going in that direction. And then there's this force of gravity that's going to eventually like bring the arrow down. And it's almost like our negative self-talk or the negative energy around something is what ends up, bringing us down. And it's not that we can just have positive thoughts and not do the work. We actually have to work our butts off, of course, take the action and stay action oriented in this positive direction. Right. And it's like, by focusing on the desired target, focusing on the reward, keep focused on that. Don't focus on the negative consequences of what's going to happen if you don't reach it. No, you're just going to keep focused on the target. And that's how you end up staying on target as opposed to falling short of the target.
Yeah.
But it's that work, that action that obviously is an integral part of it. We're not just talking about power positive thoughts. It's like power positive thoughts while you're taking major, major action.
Yeah. Well, and focus on the positive end is definitely one thing, and definitely a part of achieving like a more sustainable, actionable, like motivating positive self-talk. If we don't have awareness of our negative self-talk, if we don't, like, that's basically the first step in my view and experience is actually making some effort to look and go, what is my negative self-talk right now? Where in my life do I feel lower than I want to feel? Where is my energy heavier? With whom is my energy heavier? With around what goals and why, like asking those questions, really being in that inquiry to look without judgment on ourselves. Like there's nothing wrong with having negative self-talk. It's totally normal.
Totally normal.
We all have it. And so that's the thing. What we all don't necessarily have is the willingness to actually look at it really objectively as a step to getting to the more positive, joyful, sustainably motivated place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like rooting out kind of the weeds kind of thing. Like another thing I feel like we talked about last week a little bit was having like what our core beliefs are. Like, what do we believe? And rooting out the contradictory kind of and negative beliefs around, our worthiness, around our capability. And like really, because we feel when we have a negative core belief, it dings us down and it works against us. So like, if we're paying attention, you can feel it, even if you don't necessarily have awareness around it, right? You feel yourself drop down.
Definitely.
And then to look, like you said, like root it out and be like, well, what is this that I believe here? Or how is this sneaking in? And be like, oh, that's because, I was raised, in maybe an environment where I wasn't, worthy or wasn't good enough, or it wasn't worthwhile to pursue artistic, just a silly example, but like pursuing artistic beliefs. If you were raised in a family where like you had to be a lawyer or a doctor,
right?
That's still likely in there somewhere, and it is dinging you. So being aware of feeling it. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think most people in general have a version of I'm not good enough based on just being corrected as a kid. There's a whole gamut of trauma we can talk about, but really it's more like, how do we, I love what you were pointing to, is that just first recognize you probably have some of this, it's likely there. First, let's do that. Secondly, you said to feel and go, well, how, if awareness is the first step, well, shit, how do I become aware of my limiting thoughts or my assumptions or my self-defeating gremlins or whatever they are, is that we feel that energetic and emotional heaviness and charge. So where we feel that in our body, when it tenses our chest or tightens our head or whatever it does, causes us weird butterflies, or again, however it manifests, that's a way for us to go to look at and start to inquire. So
yeah. And also too, when you bring up, all of us on some level struggle with this am I good enough stuff, it really clicked over the last couple of weeks too, that like, that's the same thing as fundamental self-respect. I had a meeting with, I do some corporate coaching, and I was meeting with the head of the company, the CEO, and I was going over some skills for self-respect. And she's like, well, everyone should have self-respect. I definitely believe everyone should have self-respect. I'm like, yeah, of course. And like, we don't. Like on some level, all of us struggle with self-respect, because if we really had self-respect, we would never think that we're not good enough.
Totally.
Like that's the very freaking definition of self-respect, is knowing that we're good enough.
Yeah. And
we all struggle with that.
Yeah.
So another way of looking at that or saying is like, we all struggle with self-respect. And how fucked up is that? Well, that we struggle respecting ourselves, right? And if we don't respect ourselves, of course it's going to manifest outwardly, right?
Yeah. And I think it depends on the area of life. Like for instance, some people are extremely with it and totally respect themselves and feel confidence and ease and calm and all of those sort of positively strong, powerful emotions in their career, for example. But in a love relationship, they really struggle, so it really just depends. So it's not like
a zero sum.
So I would encourage people to look and to go, and to be honest about like, okay, I'm confident here, but I'm really not confident here. Why is that? Like, what's up there? Again, I keep going back to the inquiry only because that's the first part.
No, and I remember so well, like having this epiphany myself that like, wait a minute, like when I'm at work, because out of college, I went right into like corporate America and right to work. And I always felt so confident in work. Like I could do anything. I really believed in myself. I made a mess of plenty of things, right? So like, it was like overinflated, like sense of confidence at times, right? Of course. But like I had that confidence. But like in social interactions or like personal, like it was not there. And I remember it was like, why is it when I'm at work, I am so, and I also at a young age too realized the fundamental epiphany around like, if I believe that I'm good enough, I do better work, right? Like I'm sure I probably never told you the story of that. So I went to Yale, and at Yale, I really struggled feeling good enough because suddenly I was in this environment where everyone was like so much smarter in my assessment, right?
Like
and more worldly, sophisticated.
Yeah.
You know, their preparation for college was on a whole different echelon than mine. So I felt incredibly inferior academically when I, you know, intellectually, and definitely socially, because I hadn't traveled the world and I didn't know what, you know, foie gras was, silly things. But like, I mean, it was my self-esteem just took a huge hit.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I have a similar experience where I like remember very vividly the first time I had foie gras, and I was like, it was at like the 5-course meal with, it was, and I was
mine was
like,
the Bellagio, and I was like, this is the best thing ever.
I felt completely out of my element. It was back in college. It was like, oh my gosh.
So at Yale, I had that mental cloud around whether I was good enough because I was not. like pretty much every objective, like checkbox, I was like, nope, not that. I was like, let me go get a tattoo stat to say I'm not like everyone else. And I did. But then I did a semester. I basically over the summer, I did one class at New Paltz, SUNY New Paltz, because by getting that one credit, I then was able to take a full semester off of Yale and travel and take internships and stuff. Cool. And so the one class I did at SUNY New Paltz, I felt so like SUNY New Paltz. Not that SUNY New Paltz isn't awesome, but I felt in my mind that I was definitely capable of doing my best work. The work that I did in the course that I took at SUNY New Paltz, I got back to Yale and I had my papers and I read it objectively, kind of read one of the papers that I wrote at SUNY New Paltz and one of the papers in a very similar, you know, poli-sci course that I wrote at Yale. The paper I wrote at Yale sucked.
Yep.
It was poorly written. It was honestly like horrible. Yeah. And the paper that I wrote at New Paltz was like, it was a damn good paper. Like it was, and I realized that moment, the only difference was how I felt about whether I was good enough, whether I was capable of doing good work. Yeah. And so I had that epiphany. It was my senior year. It was the second semester of my senior year at Yale that I was like, and from that moment on, I'm like, I will never allow myself to do any work from that headspace, right? Yeah. Of course, you have to be aware of it. But that was when I had that epiphany for myself, because I sat there staring at 2 different papers I had written. Yep. And you would never in a million years think that the same person wrote them, right?
No, it's
night and day.
This stuff is proven. I cannot remember the episode, but I bring up The Art of Charm all the time, but it's my favorite podcast. There was an episode about this exact phenomenon that in certain environments, and it was about colleges specifically, that depending on your perception, like how like imposter syndrome is like rife, and like when we're, God, I wish I'm going to try to remember the source of this, but it basically really speaks to if you go to a school, if students go to a school where they feel more confident, they do better. No question about it. And they do end up typically doing more in the world as well. Like, thank God you had that epiphany. And didn't
I think though too.
Just to end the thought is just, and didn't continue forward into your life years later with that unseen thing, which is why I'm bringing back, because of this positive self-talk focus of this conversation. I'm like, yay, thank God you had that epiphany then.
Yeah. And my work senior year, my second semester when I was back at Yale, I got all A's. Yeah. Which, believe me, I was not getting A's up to that point at Yale. I was like not doing well academically, but that's okay. Cause you know, but that, yes, it's like, and that was my first real like experience. Cause up to before Yale, I had no problem with positive self-talk. I don't know why I was wired the way I was wired, but I definitely felt really, and life had, you know, rewarded and demonstrated that I was capable. I was capable academically. I was capable athletically. I was capable socially, generally speaking. But yeah, it was the first time that I was like, oh, I actually suck. Like actually like in this pool, but it made me take my skillfulness. I became such a more skillful writer, communicator, critical thinker.
Totally.
So
yeah, that's exactly, it's one of the things like in sort of prepping for this conversation, I was like, that's the number one. If we go to, okay, what's the next step? We identify a positive or a negative self-talk piece that's holding us back or whatever. It's to, and this is such a charged word, but find affirmations, which is not to say, Stuart Smalley, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, gosh darn it, people like me. Because if we don't believe it, it's not going to make a difference, right? We need to, our affirmation, which just for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's basically a statement that we can say and read and just experience and take in with frequency that helps us reprogram that default negative thought to keep that new positive thought in our mind. And it's not just the positive thought, it's the positive thought we also believe. And so that's where the emotional kick part comes. So anyway, back to what you were saying about capability, that's always been something I feel super lucky to have gotten as well. And skydiving is definitely a piece of this. Like, you think you're gonna, no chance you can jump out of an airplane and not die. You jump out of an airplane and you don't die, you live, and it just like does something weird with your
mind blowing.
It just blows your mind. It tells you, it really disproves the impossible, or I can't do that thing, to whoa, I can do that thing, which is super fundamental, but that's definitely informed, like on top of other sort of achievement stuff for me, like as sort of a type A high achiever. If we talk about, people ask me all the time, who do you work with? And that's it. I work with type A high achievers. And that's the thing. It's then what I then realized was, okay, I don't necessarily have skills that I need in the emotional realm, but I can do and learn anything. So that like positive affirmation, like that positive self perception about my capability supported me through that part of my growth as both a professional and just a person, emotionally being able to deal with things.
Yeah. And just to add to that, like another, I think, skill that we can talk about here is recognizing how kind of our brain is wired to like and want the familiar, and not like and not want the unfamiliar. And so lots of times when we say that, oh, I don't like that, or I can't do that, or that is hard, it's not coming from a place of truth. It's coming from a place of kind of like wants or likes. And we have always had the capability to make anything that's unfamiliar familiar. There's someone named Marissa Peer that talks about this a lot, but like,
excellent.
Like when we say that, oh, that's really hard for me. Like if, like some people aren't huggers. I'm a hugger. Like, I don't know if you know, like, I'm like, give me some hugs. Like I love hugs. But there's a lot of people that like, they're like, that's really uncomfortable for me. That's really hard for me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's uncomfortable. It's hard. It's unfamiliar.
Yes.
And we have always had the capability for kind of saying, wait a minute, why am I saying that? It feels hard, but it's not that it's actually hard. It's just unfamiliar. So it's out of my comfort zone. And we can change that assessment. And instead of saying, oh, that's hard for me, be like, that's unfamiliar. So like to switch, like this is a skill.
Love that.
Swap from it being hard to being, that's unfamiliar.
Love it.
And then be open to making it familiar and gaining the benefits. So anyone out there watching this who's not a hugger.
Yes.
Like hugs are so good. Like hugs are good. You get all the like endorphins. Like, I mean, like, so if you're someone that's like, oh, hugging is kind of like uncomfortable, hard, give it a chance. Like give it a chance to see, can I make hugging familiar? It's like a silly example, but like anything that you catch yourself saying, oh, that's really hard for me. It's really hard for me to say positive things to myself, to have these, it's really hard for me to be like, you can do it. You can do it. Like if you heard me, you know me well enough to know that whenever I do something hard, I literally am like, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it in my head. It's ridiculous. Like I'm like a 5-year-old. I'm like I'm carrying 18 things out of the car, trying to get it in the house. And there's like really zero chance I'm not going to drop everything. I'm like, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And I don't focus on, oh, if I drop this, it's going to be a huge mess. I'm going to break things in a disaster. I'm literally like, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And I do it. But like, if that's hard for you, like, don't like shift from saying, oh, that's hard to saying, oh, that's unfamiliar. And let me practice.
Yeah.
We always have the opportunity to shift something from being unfamiliar, which our brain often says is hard, to familiar. and then easy. And if you recognize something there's a benefit, like there are scientific benefits to hugging people. Like if you don't know it, it's true. Hugs, major scientific benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So shift to something that you know is good for you, eating lots of vegetables. It's hard for me to eat so much vegetables. It's unfamiliar. You can do it, right? And so identify the things that you say are hard and shift it to unfamiliar, and then be like, okay, how am I going to make this more familiar? Like that's an actionable skill.
Yep.
Right? That's shifting from negative, hard self-talk to positive, doable.
Yeah. There's, I think, an undertone of perfectionism in the it's hard. Like, and I speak because of, I always joke I'm a recovering perfectionist, ha ha ha. But like really that if it's unfamiliar, and we just are making some efforts to make it familiar, but are detached from the outcome, that speaks to another skill in this of just reframing. So if we recognize a sort of negative self-talk thought, and we do the affirmation where it's a singular thought that really just we can use as a repetitive sort of thing that supports us when we feel that other those emotions coming up and those feelings coming up, we can use those affirmations. And the reframe is also sort of, it's a similar thing, but it's basically like rewriting a story. You know, if we have a story that we say, like, this is truth, you know, this is how it is. And it's sort of a small example, but if you're saying this is hard, like I don't know, the hug thing, like I can't be a hugger. Like I've never been a hugger. I've always just really liked to keep my distance. Like that's just how I am. That type of story, that's just how I am, is so insanely limiting. So it's this idea of reframing. And one thing that it's a small language hack, as it were, but I tend to just reframe things like that by saying, I've historically not been a hugger, AKA I could be a hugger in the future if XYZ whatever willingness occurred in me. You know what I'm saying? And by the way, that is not even a story that's true. I totally am a hugger.
Like, you and I am.
Like,
it used to be just a side story. Like I used to worry, right? Because I'm working on all this stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Like that, like who are the people I should hug? Who are the people I shouldn't hug? Like, and I've abandoned that. And like, it was like last week, there was someone I had met before, but there's someone that like, I don't see very often, and they meet a lot of people, someone on the tour, one of Camila's dancers. And we were at iFly actually. I'll send you this. We all went to iFly together in Chicago. It was like Camila's day off. And so the whole crew came in, and I'd met everybody a couple times before, but always in the context of the tour. And so, you know, I'm hugging everybody. And one of the dancers, obviously, like he didn't remember me, and he was obviously like not a hugger. I was like, hey, and I felt bad, but I surrendered to the imperfection of like, I'm going to hug some people that obviously were not comfortable with me hugging them. And I apologize in advance and forward and backwards for the people that I hugged that didn't want to be hugged. I hug everybody now.
Well, obviously, of course, we don't mean like in regards to the hugging, we don't mean invade people's personal space and, you know, make someone feel physically accosted. Like, duh, we're not talking about that. But like, yeah, it's really
embracing the mess, that nothing's going to be perfect, right? Like I still fail. I still have moments of failure where I'm like, well, that wasn't probably the best hug, but that's okay. You know, it's all still the example, but it's, you know, it's a macro or micro example of, you know, you do your best and then it doesn't work out perfectly. And then instead of beating myself up for the next, you know, day that I hugged someone who probably didn't want to be hugged, you just move on. Just like, okay.
That's a literal, physical, obviously literal example where we know that you've either succeeded in your goal to hug more or not succeeded because either you did hug or you didn't hug. So it's where this is the reason I say that and make this distinguish between is that like I tend to work mostly in the emotional realm. Like, yeah, okay, for sure we have life coaching includes actionable goals and stuff, but a lot of it is preceded, and we take these really not literal
Abstract, yeah.
goals and emotional skills, and we make them actionable. As in, how in the heck do we practice affirmation? How in the heck do we practice or get iteration and repetition with our reframed story? You know what I mean? And the answer to that is to set that goal of, say, and this is something I do with clients a lot, is like, and you can do it with someone, an accountability partner or somebody who's willing to be this person for you. But how I tend to make that actionable with my clients is that when they feel something or they're in the classic experience, I say, send me a text, you know, like basically do something actionable that gets us
Out of
interrupting the old unconscious thought. Like because that's the thing, like how do we do it? That's, of course people would ask that question, like, okay, yeah, it's good for you to say, but how does this help me? Like, I get that it's possible, Mel, thanks, but how do I do it?
I think it's a great segue too, because I mean, I talk to a lot of people that are aware that their negative self-talk is probably their biggest challenge, right? Like they're aware that they're their own worst critic, that they beat themselves up, that when they make mistakes, they're really, really hard on themselves. They don't go easy on themselves or not gentle with themselves.
Yep.
And so they're like, well, okay, so how do I change that? Like, I know that I have this problem. I am aware of it. I don't need to sense. I'm like, I hear it. It's very aware. I'm very aware that I have it. So how do I start to change it? Right. So if you want to speak to that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like I encourage people to initially do a brainstorm around where they see themselves feeling more low, where they end up feeling triggered, like to really look at the trigger points first as the first step, because we have to look at them and then pick them apart a little bit to get to the root, you know, because a lot of people have so much story around the trigger that it takes a little bit of unpacking and asking why. Like, and that's the thing, like if you're trying to do this on your own, and that's totally legit, like look at the triggers and say, okay, this is a place where I see myself feeling triggered or feeling low or feeling fearful or feeling less than whatever. And say, okay, if the story is, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to be social, like, or I don't feel comfortable going to, and this is an example so I'm learning to dance because
Yay!
I like physical things and it helps support me and balance me and whatnot. So it's not easy to go and like basically go dance or go to a class or go anywhere by yourself for some people. Like I don't have a ton of problem with that because I have been very social in skydiving. Like I feel like I've earned that skill set. But even for me, there's like a little bit of like, oh, okay, I don't want to necessarily go by myself. And like, you know, so ask like, okay, you don't want to go to a dance class by yourself. Well, why? Well, I don't want to feel stupid. Like, you know, I don't know, like that I don't have anyone to go with. Well, why? You know, so like, well, because if, you know, I don't have anyone to go with, like, I don't know, maybe it just like means I'm not like I don't have any friends, but I do have friends. Like, it just will look like, you know, I don't want people to think that I'm lame, you know? Well, why?
Yeah.
You know, like,
exactly. The core beliefs.
Keep asking. And it's non-judgmental why. Non-judgmental questions about that.
Yeah.
So like, why? Okay, great. Because maybe, again, like for me, it would come down to love and connection, wanting to feel safe and love and connection, wanting to know that I would be able to be connected and accepted and loved by even these random new people. Like it's very, for me, like that, you know, that would be one of those things, right? And feeling loved and accepted in a social setting. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I love everything that you're saying. And another way of explaining it or term around it is we can talk about like our core beliefs and getting to the root of our core beliefs, right? Like, you know, we can say on the surface, oh, I don't care what people think about me.
Right.
But all of us have contradicting core beliefs around that, because we don't like it when people don't think highly of us, right? It's like, okay, so why don't I like that? Right? Why? Like you said, this very non-judgmental, why? Well, why don't I like it? Well, it doesn't feel good. Okay, that's true. But why doesn't it feel good? Well, it doesn't feel good because I don't have enough self-esteem in that area to kind of withstand that judgment in certain situations, right? And it's like, okay. And so then you get to that deeper place and you can shift around it, and you can shift the core beliefs around it. And a lot of it, like you said, we all have areas in our life that are more vulnerable. You know, like if we were raised in a family where we could never be good enough, right? Like if our parents had this really well-meaning kind of way about parenting where they were very, very harsh. They held us to high standards and we never reached them, and we were never good enough, which in their mind they kept, and they were successful in helping us be overachievers.
Right.
But it also planted this kind of I'm not good enough fear, that we feared kind of that negative energy coming from the outside, as opposed to tapping into our intrinsic passion, our intrinsic joy of achievement. And instead we're fearing from the outside in, right? And so getting to a deeper kind of, you know, unearthing of the root of that dysfunction, and then like letting it go. Like, I am a good daughter. Like something that simple, sometimes be like, wait, I am a good person. I am a good daughter. Even when I'm not perfect, I am good. Like, it sounds such a silly thing to say, but for most of us, that's an affirmation that hits deep. Like, even when I make mistakes, even when I fail, even when I let someone down.
Yep.
Right? Because for most of us, we were raised in an environment where we were trying to not let someone down. We were trying to make someone happy with us. So we felt that light from the outside in. So an affirmation, like, even when I let someone down, I am good enough.
Yeah.
Like, that's deep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For me, I say it, what I tend to go back to is I am a good person. Like, I believe very deeply, very objectively, logically, and also emotionally now. Like, that is what I come back to, is that I might fuck it all up, but I know that I'm trying my best, that I know that my intention is pure, that I'm coming from a loving place always, period. I know that. You know?
Yeah, well, that's the intrinsic worth, right?
Yeah.
That's tapping into our intrinsic worth, as opposed to that kind of conditional worth. I'm only good enough if I achieve something.
Right.
We need to shift that mindset from the I'm only good enough if I only respect myself if.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
If I achieve this, if I don't mess this up. Because we know, right? And hopefully intellectually we all know that life is messy. We're meant to be making mistakes. That's how we grow. Failure is an opportunity. Oh, a really good one I got from Dennis Waitley. Failure is like fertilizer.
Ooh, love it.
It's so good. It's all the shit. It's the nasty, like uncomfortable, yucky stuff that if we plant it, it allows us to grow and flourish, right?
Yeah, and just
loving failure.
Yeah.
No.
I'll add, like, that type of affirmation, it speaks to, it's not just like, I'm not over here just going, oh, I'm a good person, therefore I can do whatever and not care
I can be an asshole. I don't need to care about people. I don't need to work hard.
And not caring about like cleaning up or making effort to grow. That it's the whole like, what's that quote? Like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Yeah. So it's not that, right? Like, because it easily could be like, oh, yay, I'm off the hook because I meant well. You're not off the hook in terms of cleaning up things that you maybe mess up, quote unquote. And I say that because there's no judgment in that. But again, that comes back to our driving thoughts and the situations that we're in, which is sort of one thing I want to say about the social piece that I was mentioning and using as an example. is that it's back in the day, AKA when we were evolving, we needed social connection for survival. So it's totally intrinsically linked to this really deep need to be accepted and liked and loved. So, because that was part of how we were safe. So working to unpack that while also working to cultivate a support system where we do feel safe with other people. We care about, like, so what's the action around having confidence in a social setting, like going to a new dance class? For me, it comes from certainly from experience being in a social setting and being not afraid of that anymore. So having like immersion therapy of doing it, facing the fear, sort of confronting the fear. It also comes for me in cultivating a support system and caring about depth of relationship and taking the effort and making the effort and leaning into that as a goal, you know? So like identifying, what does it look like for me to have a relationship with X number of people, X number of roles in my life that allow me to feel safe in the world, you know, which sounds, you know, very deep, but it is, because it is.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And the same thing about kind of our natural kind of like or dislike, kind of dislike of the unfamiliar and liking the familiar. We're wired evolutionarily to keep us safe and alive. Like that's why we're wired that way.
Yeah.
And now we can overcome that because we're not in this primitive, you know, environment anymore. Correct. Right? We're not, it's Correct. Not that, nothing's that simple. We don't need to fear, you know, getting eaten by a lion. So it's the same principle, like our lower, hopefully our lower brain is wired this way for survival, but that's the same thing that keeps us from thriving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So unpacking that is the work, is part of the work. So,
and the other thing that you said that was so important is about kind of this massive effort. It's like when we identify our core beliefs and we identify kind of what our goals are, like having these kind of realistic, kind of healthy stretch goals, then taking massive effort in that direction. Like you have to take the action, put in the effort to get results. So it's like both. Like that's what's so, you know, people who get stuck on this, like, well, it's power of positive thinking. Positive thinking doesn't do anything if you're not taking the action, if you're not putting in the actual effort.
Totally.
And that's the two components that are so important to remember so you don't get stuck. You have to like, that power of positive thinking crap. It's both.
And so what does that look like? So I would contest, it looks like making tough choices to really assess what are my negative, quote unquote, negative influences, repeatable experiences, and people. So it's like looking at like who and what in my life, what that I'm doing and what that I'm allowing into my space is perpetuating or continually triggering these negative thoughts and reinforcing the negative thought, you know? So if we have the, you know, thought of I'm not good enough, and we find ourselves in a relationship, and I say love relationship or friendship or any relationship with any other human where that person, you know, and this is sort of a maybe hot topic, a different conversation we could have another time about toxic relationships. But when we recognize that, and it's again, not even a judgment on the humanity of another person. We don't know how and why they got to where they got and why they are that way. We can always think about that or whatever, but if we just simply acknowledge that this is an influence on me that I'm witnessing by allowing myself to be in a painful scenario, that I'm allowing and really acting from that lower belief of self, that I'm not worthy of treatment better than what I'm receiving. It's super tough, super fucking painful, you know, but even experiences, you know, like it can be so many different things, but like that's the painful part of recognizing those negative triggering parts. And like the how-to of going forward is making those choices of, do I choose out of a toxic relationship and go forward in a different direction? Do I start to apply for new jobs, or do I go to school to learn more so I can get out of a job or whatever employment situation that doesn't feel happy or good to me? You know, do I stop eating the French fries and start eating the vegetables because I recognize that that's a part of what is perpetuating this lower sense of, or perception of yourself?
And the inner pain is, do I face kind of the demons, right? The traumas of my childhood or my past, right? Like, do I face the fact that I never felt loved and validated by my mother? You know, do I face the fact that, you know, I was abused as a kid? Like, there's that inward pain that
Totally.
is scary and tough. And again, you may want to reach out and have someone help you and support you through this work, because, you know, going into that cave, right? Like that whole Star Wars, like Yoda, you got to go in the cave, Luke. You got to face the pain to face it and move through it. Having someone support you through that work is incredibly helpful. Incredibly helpful, whether it's a friend or a professional therapy.
Yeah.
Like, I am a huge fan of therapy.
Same.
Skillful therapists.
Everyone. Yeah. That's the thing. We don't have to do this alone. It's so scary. Like, it's super understandable that people would not want to go into that very scary place, emotional place, by themselves, nor know how to necessarily navigate it. So why would they do it? It totally makes sense. That's why professionals exist. Yeah. So like, I couldn't recommend it more. I really feel like part of like something I care about consistently sharing is like, therapy used to have, or maybe still does have, this really negative connotation. Like, oh, if I need a therapist, I'm crazy or I'm fucked up. No. You're just using a tool available to you, a resource available to you, a teammate available to you to grow through some of the biggest shit that's holding you back.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Love it.
Well, love it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
I
think we hit, I made some notes. This is one of the first times I actually made notes.
I know. I'm totally preparing more for these because I care about being on point for you guys, for you, Pam, certainly, but for everyone watching also. It's like,
can I end with one more awesome quote I got from Dennis Wheatley?
Yes.
So it's kind of like the Serenity Prayer, which I talk about all the time, but the way he says it, he says you have to accept the unchangeable, right? Accept the unchangeable, change the changeable, and then remove yourself from the unacceptable. So like, to circle back around, thinking about like, negative self-talk needs to be unacceptable for all of us. Like, we have to have a zero tolerance policy for negative self-talk. And that is, like you said in the beginning, it's not sticking your head in the sand. It's being our biggest coach. Like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can. I may have to get back up 18 times, but I can do this. I can do this. None of this I can't stuff. None of this is hard. Like, don't even say that to yourself. That's putting negative energy around it. Like, this is tricky. You know, I don't say stress anymore. I don't believe in stress. I say, this is tricky. This is tricky. This is tricky, but I can do it. Like, I can do it. It's tricky. This is going to take some skills. But that's like my positive shift around. Like, I don't let myself say to myself that something's hard. I don't say that it's something stressful. I say it's tricky, and luckily I'm really skillful and I'm going to figure it out. Like, everything is figure outable. I'm resourceful. I'm hardworking. I can figure this out. That's the kind of stuff I say to myself.
Exactly.
And that's the kind of stuff that I have a zero tolerance policy for, you know, the way I talk to my kids, the way my husband and I talk. Like, he knows I'm kind of a pain in the ass. I have a zero complaint policy, zero negativity policy, and he's not wired like that. So is, you know, you can vent, right? And the other thing people say too is like, well, I don't want to vent. Like, you can vent. There's a difference between venting and letting stuff out. Then there's a difference to complaining and bringing stuff down.
Yes.
Like, venting is letting stuff up and out, like releasing up and out and then moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different than complaining, which is bringing stuff down.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's a balance between taking fierce personal responsibility, because if I look at, again, going back to the whole type A, I can do it, high achiever, which is certainly how I have been, or like I was in the early part of my, or, you know, beginning part of my adulthood, is that I would do it all myself because I was super afraid of being rejected and getting evidence of being unloved. So super, super overly attached to the other person. So now for me, it's this very conscious choice of who do I like cultivating those supportive relationships, right? So being courageous enough to show my pain, to experience, to grow and allow my people to support me in the ways that I need, right? Like I'm going to be fine regardless. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I don't need anybody. But like I used to be too isolated. It sounds super weird. I was very social, but not necessarily super deep with like just a select few. So like it's more like the idea of saying, okay, I know I can be fierce as fuck, just like what you're talking about. Like, I know I can do this for myself. So it's being in the practice of that for sure, cultivating that skill of not needing reassurance from someone else, not needing someone to validate my worth, that my worth really is here. And I'm in the practice of that, which is, there's a subtle distinction from requiring validation externally from another person and allowing them to support me because they've earned my trust. So it's like, there's a subtle distinction there, and it's exciting. It's really cool. So the only reason I speak to that balance is because I used to be the person who was like, I have to do it all myself. I have to do it all myself, versus a healthy balance of allowing support and really taking personal responsibility for our emotional selves.
Yeah. And I think a really good corollary to that, and another actionable, like, aha, is if someone compliments you, right? And like, it used to be if someone paid me a compliment, I'd be like, oh no, it's nothing. Oh no, that wasn't really my best work at all. Aha, like huge red flag, right?
Yes.
Huge red flag.
Yes.
That there is a dysfunction there.
Yes.
That we're not coming from this inside out intrinsic worth, that we have work to do. And it's one of my areas of practice because it's still quite the habit. And it's still really uncomfortable when someone pays me a compliment. And one of my practices now is just say, thank you. I really enjoyed writing the book, or I feel really good about my work with the book, or, you know, just if someone compliments me on how I look, or, you know, whatever, being fit, whatever, like, thank you. I work really hard. I really appreciate that. Like, it's hard, but that is a red flag. If we have trouble taking compliments, it means that there's part of us that is not whole around our self-worth and our respect, that it doesn't feel true, and we need to deflect. It doesn't feel true. And that is obviously an issue, and something that is an opportunity.
Yeah. And unfamiliar, like you said.
Unfamiliar.
I love it. Like, okay, it's a bit unfamiliar to know how to graciously and earnestly accept a compliment. It's funny. My friends and I, we used to have this joke where we would say, you're welcome. Like, it's like taking it to the ego joke of like, oh, Mel, I really like that shirt. It's awesome. You're welcome. Like, we would joke about it. Like, you're such an asshole that you're just like, you know, like the shirt is for you. You're welcome for my looking good in the shirt. Like, so dumb, right?
But I like it because it helps crack this. Like, it's.
But we took the joke. So we took the joke to multiple levels. Like, we really took this joke way too far. It was hilarious.
I love that about you.
But we all, I know, it's the comedy is magnified and whatever. But what we joked about at the end was that we said, but actually, full enlightenment is the absence of you're welcome and saying thank you. So it's like to be like, you know, to actually, after all of those times joking, like, oh, Mel, I really like that shirt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like, it's so interesting. That's a whole nother thing. We could do a whole sesh on that.
Yeah, but I think it goes so hand in hand. The negative self-talk, it's if someone gives us a compliment, if we're not able to just thank them and graciously accept it, it shows that we've got negative self-talk issues.
Yeah, and potentially a connection to our value around humility. So like, again, we should let's cut it off and actually say, because we could keep going
next week.
But yeah, let's maybe think about or talk about or consider doing a whole session on humility and explore that one as well. I'm up for it. I love you.
Love it. I love you. I love getting time with you.
I don't care. You guys get our love fest every week. It's gonna happen. We're giving into it.
And now you know we're huggers, so